Hi everyone, this is Athena from Courage Coaching. Thank you so much for joining me today. In today's video, I wanted to talk about childhood trauma and how this affects us in our adult lives, how we relate to other people because of our childhood trauma, and how we can sometimes find ourselves in really tricky situations where we are actually a lot more vulnerable than people that didn't have childhood trauma. If you have suffered abuse in your childhood, so your parents were not able to meet your needs, they neglected you, they abused you, they weren't able to be a good parent, they weren't able to unconditionally love you, then this means that you will have certain emotional wounds, you'll have certain difficulties in regulating your emotions because your parents weren't able to help you do this. Also, it might have been that you grew up in an environment where you didn't feel safe, where you didn't feel that you could trust your parents, where you constantly saw really dodgy behavior, you constantly saw your parents doing really bad things. And with this, you carried a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of fear. And when you are in an unsafe environment, it makes it very hard for you to then feel normal when you're an adult, right? You don't know how to be around people. You don't know whether you can trust people. Or sometimes, because you were so emotionally starved in your childhood, because you may have felt really isolated growing up or really lonely growing up, you may actually trust people too much. One result of childhood trauma and abuse is that some individuals find it extremely hard to trust other adults, and other individuals actually trust people too much. And that is going to be the focus of today's video: trusting too much, being much more vulnerable to being re-victimized in adulthood because of this need to trust others too much. Now, trusting others too much, like I said, is a result of childhood trauma, and this tends to happen especially when the trauma you have suffered in childhood is related to narcissistic abuse. It may have been that one of your parents was like this and the other parent was an enabler of this behavior. It may have been that both parents were narcissistic. But either way, if you didn't have a safe parent growing up, then this makes the trauma a lot worse, and you will most definitely be living with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as CPTSD. Now, if you were unlucky enough to grow up with people that you couldn't really trust, and that you couldn't openly be your authentic self, and you couldn't openly express your emotions, you will find it really hard to trust in adulthood. Or because you had such severe emotional neglect and you didn't have any safe people to be around, and because you felt so lonely as a child, you will have this kind of gaping emotional hole where you have been starved of this love and affection in your childhood, and you are desperately seeking this now as an adult. And this desperate seeking of love and attention is what makes you want to put your trust in other people. This is what makes you want to see the kindness in people. So when you are in a situation where you've just met somebody and you aren't seeing any red flags, you may get really excited. You may be like, oh, this person's really nice. They're not doing anything strange. And this might be something that is really, really helpful for you. And the fact that this person seems so lovely gives you hope. It makes you think that, you know what, maybe I have a new friend. Maybe I can trust this person. Maybe I can really be myself with this person. They've said some things that I think means that they are safe. But the problem is, when you have suffered childhood neglect and trauma, you are not so good at paying attention to red flags, because what other people may see as a red flag, you might think is normal because you were in an environment that had dysfunction. And when you've been in an environment that's had dysfunction, you are more likely to fall for predators. You are more likely to trust people that aren't to be trusted. You want to trust people too soon because you deeply want to connect with another person. You're hungrier than most healthy people for love and attention. You were so deprived in childhood that you need this even more, and this is what makes you more vulnerable. And it's really difficult to fill that hole This hole is called traumatic aloneness, and I've made another video about this. So my advice in general is just try and take it slow. Because if somebody has red flags, you are not going to notice in the first time you meet them or the second time you meet them. Some people are covertly abusive, and they are so well at hiding their nasty behavior. They can smile at you and pretend everything's okay. But underneath that, they may be really envious. They may not really like you. They may have so many deep insecurities, but you're not seeing them yet. So taking it slow, slowly getting to know someone and forging a relationship with them is a better way to make sure that you are safe. When you have been starved of affection and love in childhood, any tiny amount of kindness from somebody else will suck you straight in like a magnet, because this is something you are desperately missing. This makes you vulnerable. It will always make you vulnerable. But if you can build up a social circle of friends that are safe, you won't feel this intense need so much. You are more vulnerable for this need of connection with others when you are on your own. If you are estranged from your family because of the abuse, and you don't actually have a lot of friends, you don't have any family members left, this makes you more vulnerable to further abuse. It makes you more vulnerable to trusting the wrong people. So a few other things that make us vulnerable to trusting too much and then getting burned is: number one, having poor boundaries. Number two, if we are seeking approval outside of ourselves, if we are seeking validation externally, this will also make us much more vulnerable to potential predators, to potential toxic individuals that don't have our best interests at heart. And lastly, if we have a desperate need to connect with somebody, to feel acceptance, to not feel lonely, to not feel isolated, and to avoid feeling sad because we are lonely and isolated, well, this will also make us much more vulnerable to toxic individuals. On the other hand, there are also many of you that don't trust anybody, and you have isolated yourself from the world because you don't trust other humans, because you don't want to have contact with other people, because all they have ever done is hurt you. And that is another way of protecting yourself, but it's also not ideal. Balance is what you need. It is so important to have balanced relationships. Many of you live alone, have a dog or a cat or a couple of pets, and that is enough for you. And that's great. You know, if you're happy that way and you feel safe that way, then that's great. At least you have a pet, right? But human connection is something that we do all need, even if it's just one friend, even if it's just one other person in your life that you feel comfortable with. If you need support with this, then please feel free to send me an email at courageisallyounneed@gmail.com. I hope that you found today's topic useful. If you could relate to it, then please feel free to leave a comment below the video. Thank you so much, and I will see you very, very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.